Someone who is always tired wakes up after 8 hours of sleep and still feels like they haven't rested at all. They open their eyes, and the first thought isn't about the day ahead. It's about how heavy everything already feels. How the simple act of getting out of bed requires a negotiation with their body, their mind, their will. They move through their morning like they're walking through water. Every gesture weighted, every task monumental. And if you've ever been that person, even once, then you know this tiredness has nothing to do with how much you slept last night. It has everything to do with how much you've been carrying for far too long. People who are always tired carry a particular kind of exhaustion. Not the kind that comes from physical exertion, not the kind that a good night's sleep can fix, but the kind that lives in your bones, in your chest, in the quiet spaces between thoughts. It's the exhaustion of a mind that never stops processing, a heart that never stops feeling, a nervous system that never stops bracing for what might come next. And the strangest part is that nobody around them can see it. They see someone functional, someone who shows up, someone who keeps going. They don't see someone who is running on fumes, who has been running on fumes for so long they've forgotten what it feels like to actually have energy. Someone asks, "Why are you always so tired? You don't even do that much." The emotional weight that has no name, the mental load that never gets put down, the constant vigilance of a nervous system that learned too early that the world isn't safe, that people aren't predictable, that you need to stay alert, stay prepared, stay ready for whatever might happen next. And so you do. You stay ready. And it exhausts you in ways that sleep can never touch. Most people think tiredness is about rest deficit, but people who live with this constant exhaustion understand the truth. It's not rest they're lacking, it's relief. Relief from the invisible labor of existing in a body and mind that have been through too much. Relief from the emotional processing that happens in the background of every moment. Relief from the weight of caring too deeply, feeling too much, remembering too clearly. This isn't laziness. This isn't weakness. This is what happens when your internal world has been working overtime for years without permission to stop. There is a heaviness to you, a slowness in your movements that isn't about physical limitation but about energetic depletion. You've learned to conserve energy in ways others don't need to calculate whether social interactions are worth the effort they'll cost, to measure every commitment against the reserves you're not sure you have. And people mistake this for lack of enthusiasm, for disinterest, for not caring. But it's not that. It's that you've learned the hard way that you only have so much to give, and you've been giving it away for so long that there's almost nothing left for yourself. People who are always tired often carry an invisible curriculum. They know what it's like to smile through exhaustion because showing how drained you are feels like admitting defeat. They know how to function on autopilot when their mind and body are begging for rest. They know what it's like to cancel plans, not because they don't want to go, but because the thought of pretending to have energy feels impossible. They know how to hide their tiredness behind coffee cups, behind busy schedules, behind the performance of being okay. They develop survival mechanisms that others mistake for personality traits. But these aren't traits. They're adaptations. Learned responses to living in a state of perpetual depletion. Research in psychology shows that chronic exhaustion often has roots in prolonged stress, unprocessed trauma, emotional overwhelm, or environments where a person had to be hypervigilant for extended periods. When your nervous system stays in a state of activation for too long, when it never fully relaxes, when it's constantly scanning for threats, or managing other people's emotions, or holding space for pain that has nowhere to go, it burns through your energy reserves at a rate that no amount of sleep can replenish. People call it burnout, but for many, it's not something that happens suddenly. It's something that's been building quietly for years. There's a particular kind of tiredness in people who grew up too fast, who had to be adults before they were ready, who took care of others when they should have been taken care of, who learned that their needs came second, third, last, or not at all. This early emotional labor creates a pattern. The body learns to operate in a state of constant output with minimal input. It learns to give and give and give without ever really receiving. And over time, this imbalance doesn't just create tiredness. It creates a bone-deep exhaustion that feels permanent. What makes this particularly painful is that the tiredness affects everything. Your ability to feel joy becomes muted. Your capacity for presence becomes limited. Your tolerance for stress becomes non-existent. Things that used to excite you now feel like obligations. Things that used to be easy now feel overwhelming. And you start to wonder if this is just who you are now. If being tired is your permanent state, if you'll ever feel alive again, or if this dull, heavy existence is all that's left. People who are always tired often develop a complicated relationship with rest. On one hand, they crave it desperately. On the other hand, when they finally get the chance to rest, they can't. Their mind won't stop. Their body won't relax. They lie down, and instead of peace, they find anxiety. Instead of calm, they find all the thoughts and feelings they've been too busy to process. Rest becomes confrontation, and confrontation feels more exhausting than just staying busy, so they stay busy. And the cycle continues. This exhaustion also changes how they move through relationships. They become the person who always has to cancel, who always needs to reschedule, who shows up but isn't fully present because they're using all their energy just to be there physically. And they feel guilty. Guilty for not having more to give, guilty for disappointing people, guilty for being tired when, from the outside, their life doesn't look hard enough to justify this level of depletion. But exhaustion isn't about how hard your life looks to others. It's about how hard it feels to you. And for someone carrying invisible weight, everything feels harder than it should. The tiredness also affects decision-making. Simple choices become overwhelming. What to eat for dinner, what to wear, whether to respond to a message. These aren't big decisions, but when you're already depleted, every decision requires energy you don't have, and so you procrastinate. You avoid. You let things pile up not because you're irresponsible, but because the mental energy required to address them feels impossible to summon. And then you feel guilty about that too, which takes more energy, which makes you more tired. The cycle is vicious. What people don't understand about chronic tiredness is that it's not just physical, it's emotional, it's mental, it's spiritual. It's a depletion that happens on every level of your being. You're tired of trying, tired of caring, tired of holding yourself together, tired of pretending you're okay, tired of carrying weights that aren't even yours, tired of being strong, tired of being functional, tired of being the version of yourself that everyone needs you to be. You're not tired of living, you're tired of surviving, and there's a profound difference between the two. Sleep, when it finally comes, often isn't restful. You dream anxiously. You wake frequently. Your body might be still, but your mind is running marathons. You wake up more exhausted than when you went to bed because your nervous system doesn't know how to actually power down. It's been on high alert for so long that even sleep isn't safe. Even rest feels like something you have to monitor, something you have to get right, something else you might fail at. People who are always tired often hear the same advice. Just rest more, take a vacation, try yoga, drink more water. And while these things aren't wrong, they miss the point entirely. Because the exhaustion isn't about needing a break from external demands. It's about needing relief from internal ones. From the hypervigilance, from the emotional labor, from the constant processing, from the weight of being yourself in a world that has required too much from you for too long. You can't yoga your way out of nervous system dysregulation. You can't vacation away from trauma responses. There's also a social dimension to chronic tiredness that's rarely discussed. When you're always tired, you start to withdraw. Not because you don't care about people, but because social interaction requires a performance of energy you can't sustain. You have to be on. You have to engage. You have to match other people's enthusiasm. And when you're running on empty, this feels impossible. So you decline invitations. You become flaky. You disappear from group chats. And people interpret this as you not caring. When the truth is, you care too much. You care so much that you've depleted yourself. And now you're in survival mode. And survival mode doesn't have energy for socializing. The tiredness also creates a strange relationship with productivity. You desperately want to do things. You have goals, dreams, projects you care about, but the gap between wanting to do something and having the energy to actually do it feels insurmountable. So you sit with the guilt of underachievement. You watch yourself not living up to your own potential. Not because you're lazy, not because you don't care, but because you're operating with a fraction of the energy that others seem to have. And you can't explain this to people without sounding like you're making excuses. What makes this exhaustion particularly isolating is that it's invisible. There's no cast, no visible injury, no medical diagnosis that explains to others why you're struggling. You look fine. You seem fine. So people expect fine-level performance from you. They don't see the Herculean effort it takes just to show up. They don't see you negotiating with yourself every morning about whether today is a day you can function. They don't see the calculations you make about energy expenditure. They just see someone who seems tired and maybe needs to try harder. But here's what people who are always tired need to hear. This exhaustion makes sense. It's not a character flaw. It's not weakness. It's not something you're doing wrong. It's your nervous system's response to prolonged stress, to carrying too much for too long, to environments where you couldn't fully rest, to relationships where you had to be more than you had capacity to be. Your body isn't failing you. It's communicating with you. It's telling you that something needs to change, that the way you've been living isn't sustainable, that you need more than a good night's sleep. You need systemic rest. You need to put down weights you were never meant to carry. There's a particular kind of tiredness that comes from emotional labor that's never acknowledged. From being the strong one, from being the one who holds it together, from being the one who takes care of everyone else while quietly falling apart yourself. This labor is invisible, uncounted, unrewarded. But it takes energy, massive amounts of energy. And when you do it for years without recognition, without reciprocation, without anyone noticing the toll it takes, you don't just get tired, you get depleted at a level that sleep can't touch. People who are always tired often realize, at some point, that they've been operating in survival mode for so long they've forgotten what thriving feels like. They've normalized the exhaustion. They've accepted it as their baseline. They compare their depleted state to others' full capacity and wonder why they can't keep up. But it's not a fair comparison. You're not running the same race. You're running with weights attached that others don't carry. You're running on reserves that others never had to tap into. You're running while healing from injuries that others never sustained. The path forward isn't about pushing harder. It's about acknowledging the truth of your depletion, about recognizing that rest isn't just about sleep. It's about nervous system regulation. It's about setting boundaries. It's about saying no to things that drain you. It's about releasing the responsibility for other people's emotions. It's about putting down the weights, one by one, and allowing yourself to exist with less performance, less output, less constant effort. It's about giving yourself permission to be tired without guilt. Because the tiredness isn't your fault. It's the result of circumstances that ask too much of you. Something shifts when people who are always tired start to understand their exhaustion. They stop judging themselves for it. They stop comparing themselves to people who've never had to operate under the same constraints. They start recognizing their tiredness as information rather than failure. They begin to see that they're not weak for being exhausted. They're remarkable for having functioned this long while carrying so much. They start to honor the exhaustion instead of fighting it. And in that honoring, space opens up for actual healing. There's a strength in people who are always tired that others rarely see. Not the strength of endurance, but the strength of having survived despite depletion, of having shown up when they had nothing left, of having cared when caring took everything from them, of having continued when every part of them wanted to stop. This isn't weakness wearing a mask. This is resilience operating on fumes. And while the world might see someone who's always tired, the truth is more complex. There's someone who's been strong for too long without the support structures that make strength sustainable. And here's the profound truth that people who are always tired need to understand. You don't have to earn rest. You don't have to justify your exhaustion. You don't have to prove you're tired enough to deserve a break. The depletion is real. The weight is real. The exhaustion is valid. And you deserve more than survival. You deserve to exist in a way that doesn't constantly drain you. to live in a body that feels safe enough to rest, to inhabit a life that doesn't require constant performance, to finally, after all this time, put down what you've been carrying and discover what it feels like to be light. If you are someone who is always tired, who wakes up exhausted, who moves through life feeling like you're dragging invisible weights, then maybe it's time you hear this. You're not broken. You're not lazy. You're not failing. You're depleted. And depletion is what happens when you've given more than you've received for far too long. When you've held more than you've been held. When you've carried more than you've been carried. The tiredness is your body's way of saying enough. Of saying I need something different. Of saying I can't keep going like this. You didn't just become tired. You became tired through the accumulation of moments where you had to be strong, where you had to show up, where you had to care, where you had to perform, where you had to survive. And now, even if it feels impossible, you have the opportunity to choose something different, to build a life that doesn't constantly deplete you, to create rhythms that include real rest, to set boundaries that protect your energy, to release responsibilities that were never yours to carry. That's not selfish, that's survival. That's choosing life over the slow erosion of existing without truly living. And you deserve that choice. You've always deserved it.